Hey guys, what's up? Okay, so reason why I'm doing this video is because apparently some of you guys didn't really understand what exactly I was trying to convey in the last one. At least you misinterpreted what I was trying to say in the last one. So I am putting out this one now before the one that I wanted to do in order to try to clear that up. Now, if you disagree with me afterwards, that's fine as long as you understand what it is I'm trying to say. I don't mind you guys disagreeing as long as you get my points. If you understand the points I'm trying to make, because some of you guys didn't exactly get what I was trying to say. Some of you guys even heard things that I really didn't say at all, which I'm really getting tired of people assuming things without really listening to what the person is actually saying. That's the last one. So, this is actually the third video I've tried to record here. The first one I felt was rambling too much. The second one I felt was a little bit too aggressive. And I don't want to come off that way for the simple reason that I understand where some of you are coming from. I know that some of you guys, well, rightfully are passionate about the issue of having to deal with a government that seems to be getting out of control in terms of how it's treating its people. I mean, we've seen what's happening with the NSA. We see what's happening with promises that were made that aren't being kept. We see how deep the corruption goes as far as how big business can weave into it and how they really don't give a damn about the common people, just literally robbing from them in order to keep up their profits. So people are rightfully upset about that. And they're worried about a government that sooner or later is going to move their overreach militarily. I understand this. And I can respect the passion that some people may have in wanting to deal with this problem. But that doesn't mean you're allowed to believe bullshit. Well, okay, I shouldn't say allowed. That's kind of harsh. But, you know, if it's bullshit, it needs to be called out. And you have to understand this about me. I don't really care what side of the divide you happen to stand on politically, whether you're hold left views, right views, upside down views, right side up views, whatever color, it doesn't really matter to me. If it's bullshit, I'm going to call it out. And I've done this no matter what position you happen to hold. I've angered people on the left and I've angered people on the right because if something doesn't make sense, I'm going to say it. Before I go on, something else that and this kind of annoyed me, that I was basically being accused of siding with government or being willing to go on my knees in front of them. Now, one of the people who made that accusation, I actually happen to like the guy because I like just how rebellious he can be. But dude, you got the wrong person if you think that's the attitude I have. If you only knew my past, you'd realize I'm the last person you would say it goes on my knees in front of government. Why do you think I'm disgusted with the way things are going on in this country right now? If you had any idea the things I helped to organize, the crew of people I used to hang with, you'd realize I'm not exactly the type of person who just bows down to authority. Okay? So let's just leave it at that, right? So let's get to the crux of the matter. Second Amendment. The reason why I said what I said about the Second Amendment isn't because I happen to think that the government is A-okay and how dare you, want to, how dare you want to, you have a problem with them. No. Where the fuck are you guys getting that from? I'm trying to be nice here, okay? I don't want to come off as like overly aggressive and bite your guys' heads off. Except if you happen to be an extreme right. I don't think it's a secret. If you've been on my channel long enough, you know I have a major problem with extreme right-wing views. I find them to be selfish. I find them to be completely self-serving and very destructive. Not only self-destructive, but destructive for the rest of society. And they always seem to be backwards when it comes to bettering a society and making things better for the people living in it. That said, not every single last thing on the right I completely disagree with. If you ask me about weapons rights, for instance, I don't see any problem why people cannot own weaponry, which goes right back to the whole Second Amendment thing. I'm not against people owning guns. I happen to think that the American culture is immature when it comes to guns, but just the principle in and of itself, just being able to have something to help you defend yourself against what's going on, just being able to defend yourself is not something that I believe should be taken away from any citizen. So I'm not against the Second Amendment per se, and I'm not against the the idea of people being able to defend themselves. I'm a martial artist, for God's sakes. I own weapons. I mean, most of them are melee weapons, but still. Now, that said, again, I think that this culture happens to be extremely mature when it comes to guns, and I also think that there's a ridiculous macho image that people have when it comes to guns that really should not be there. There's a certain serious attitude that you should have if you're going to own and maintain a weapon. There's a certain discipline that you're supposed to have, and I do not see it in this country, but that's a rant for another time. To get back to what I was trying to say about the last one. The Second Amendment just simply is not, no matter how much you guys are trying to slice it or color it, it is simply not an amendment put in there to make it easy for you to rebel against a totalitarian regime. That's not the reason why that was put there. You can argue that, well, the amendments were put in there in the first place by anti-federalists in order to counteract the extra powers that the federal government was gaining. Well, okay, true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they were going to be allowing a clause to make it easy for them to rebel. One, as I said in the last video, you have to understand the context in which the Constitution was being created and the time and what was going on during that time period. There was unrest going on, and there was a lot of concern by the the founding fathers and the powers that be on what was going to go on with the ruling class of this new nation. And make no mistake, there was a ruling class. There were a group of people there who didn't want the common man to get what they got. More on that later. Actually, no, let's just go down to it now because I'm realizing what I'm saying goes into it. There are at least two things you need to understand before I go on with this so you can see why I've come to the conclusion I made about the Second Amendment. One, Americans seem to have a certain image, an idealistic image of what America represents. There's a certain set of values that Americans have. That's cool. Most of those values are, worthy of having. And that image that Americans have of America is part of the reason why certain rights were won later on. The rights of an individual, being able to give somebody the chance to get a leg up, making sure that everybody gets a fair shake. These are the ideals that Americans hold. But that is entirely different from how this country has actually functioned since its inception. Those are two different things, and Americans keep mixing that up, probably because they buy into the bullshit or because they just they really don't want to face what's going on. This country has functioned in an entirely different way than our value system leads us to believe. We have this image of America, and then there's what America actually is, how it actually functions. And despite the fact that we call this the land of the free, and we say that, everybody has a chance, there has always been a push to make sure that certain people are not able to get resources, and that's most of the population. They're not allowed to share in the resources. Ever since the original days of this country, there have been a group of people, and unfortunately for you guys, it was the ones who helped to set up the country, that did not believe in the common man being able to share in the power that this country could wield, being able to choose what direction the country goes into, and being able to ultimately share equally in the resources that this country happens to be able to produce. You can see this just in the fact that there is no direct democracy in this country. Many of the founding fathers found the idea of democracy to be nothing but mob rule. I mean, most people, when they look at the writings of the founding fathers, they always look at the stuff that makes them feel good. It's like, look what they said about liberty. Look what they said about how to fight against tyranny and stuff that makes you feel proud and puff up your chest. I'm like, look what they said. I mean, hell, right under that video, somebody was nice enough to put a whole list of really cool sounding quotes about liberty and freedom, which incidentally did nothing to disprove my point, but whatever. But I mean, quotes like that make you feel good. But you need to look at everything that these people said. Don't just look at the stuff that they wrote in order to get people to pick up the guns for them to fight that Revolutionary War. Look at the stuff that they were saying to each other about everybody else. And look at what they were saying about how the government should function. And you'll begin to see that the picture isn't as black and white and as rosy as people would like you to believe. John Adams in particular, if you read some of his stuff about how he felt the government should function, how people should be governed in this country, reveals a very interesting viewpoint on how the common man was viewed in this country. And interestingly enough, it echoes all the way up to this day, and it's closer in line to how you see people living today than it is with these idealistic notions of what Americans are and how they should be treated. He point blank felt that the common rabble, shouldn't even be thinking about sharing in the resources of this country. Like, how dare they? Who do they think they are? These idiots, these uneducated people, they don't even own capital. We, the ones who own capital, who own land, who make the money, they should be bound to us. They're there that, they're lucky to be here. They're lucky we allow them to share in a little bit that we give them. Who do they think they are? I mean, that was his idea. That's what he thought. And you can see this reflected in the way the government functions. We have an electorate in order to pick a president, for instance. Freaking electorate. You can't just, the popular vote, as nice as it is, and as much as it makes it look like you have total power, the popular vote is only there to try to give the electorate an idea of, oh, well, the people seem to want this guy, maybe we should vote for him. But if they don't want to go that way, too bad. And the electorate was picked in order to mitigate, to kind of subdue what they thought would be mob rule if they allowed you guys to be able to choose what you wanted in law. They didn't think you guys had the brains to be able to pick a decent law for this country and to pick a decent direction for it. To say nothing of what they felt about you being able to share in the spoils of this country. And there were many spoils to be had during that time period. Remember, you got that wide open land, unexplored territory full of untapped resources that anybody who has the mind to go over and grab it and make a profit out of it can, the sky's the limit. But they don't want you to have it. And they put things in place to try to keep you from doing it. Remember, these people almost put in a clause where unless you were a man of capital, you couldn't even vote. So much for, and again, this is, and even the stuff in the Constitution of itself, there's a reason why amendments were put on. If this was a perfect document, why do you need to amend it all the freaking time? To fix things that weren't exactly working right, or to change things that weren't fair. The other thing that I was saying, because I said there was two things you need to understand. One is, again, there's the idea of the country, and then there's your views, your viewpoint of the country and the way that country actually works. The other thing you need to understand is that when a designer is trying to design something, whatever their mindset is, however their vision of whatever they're designing, whatever that vision is, they're going to put systems in place to put it forth. That's just the way it is. Think of fighting games, for instance. The designers have a certain way that they wanted the players to play that game, right? And they will put elements in the mechanics of the game in order to get you to play that way. Like Street Fighter 3, for instance, I could tell that they wanted a little bit more emphasis on the hand-to-hand combat aspect and less emphasis on projectile attacks. So projectiles are not as fast as in other Street Fighter games. And you see a lot more stuff like, for instance, the blocking meter to keep you from turtling up all the time and being able to parry moves to keep the combat fluid. It becomes a lot more about being able to throw your combos in there and put up some really interesting combinations that throw the guy off guard. Footsie attacks, for those who know what that means. There's a lot more emphasis on that. They did that on purpose. Think of Soul Calibur. The Soul Calibur series, as it's progressed, they've tried to make the gameplay more aggressive, because they wanted people to spend less time blocking and more time sidestepping enemies, coming up with really interesting juggles, just throw the guy off guard. They wanted the combat to be visceral and aggressive. The best players are the ones who can just get in there and F you up. Don't spend time hiding behind like the block button. Get in there and fight. So they put elements of gameplay in there. Whatever the vision is of the designer is going to make it into whatever it is they're designing. So now let's look at the way this country functions. Let's look at the Constitution. Let's look at the way the government functions. If you're saying that the designers purposefully put in an amendment so that in case the government goes wrong, the citizens will be able to protect themselves and then overthrow this government in order to put in a new one, shouldn't we be seeing certain things in the design of the way this government functions and in the laws itself to facilitate this in case this happens? I mean, yeah, I'll admit that to say, for instance, there's a way to put in a grievance and then officially say that, okay, this isn't working, we want you to fix this or else. Maybe that's a bit naive, but there should at least be, in case things go wrong, here's how, when you're overthrowing this group or if this group gets tossed out, how to put in a transition period. Who's going to be the new leadership? Who do you get rid of? What's the process in case this person does get, overthrown for corruption? Who's going to try these people after they get overthrown for corruption? Or whatever it is that they're doing, which makes the people feel that they need to be overthrown. What are the exact laws needed to be put in that you can use to charge them for when you have to overthrow them? Like, what are the things needed in order to make it legal to overthrow them? I mean, you're saying that the Second Amendment is pretty much put in there to kind of make it sort of legal to do it. So there should be other systems put in place for that. We don't see that, but we do see systems put in place in order to keep the federal government strong and to make sure that anybody who's like, there's stuff on treason, there's stuff on, what will happen to you if you happen to go against government, but there really isn't much about being able to toss out a corrupt one. And if you're saying that, well, the Second Amendment is enough, you also have to understand that, again, look at the historical context. As somebody else had nicely pointed out, this was a period when England, before the whole Revolutionary War, was supposedly trying to limit their access to weaponry. So after fighting this Revolutionary War, the last thing these people are going to do is then try to do the same freaking thing. And besides, if we go back to Shays' Rebellion, remember how they were able to squash it with a private army. And it's easier to put that army together if everybody already owns weapons, if you don't have to supply them yourself. If everybody already has the means to, use and train in firearms, and then you say, shit, we need to get together in order to like repel borders or to deal with problems from within. You just gather up the group of people and get them in the militia, and that's that. There's not that, you don't have to waste that much time. There's an advantage to that. Other countries have realized this as well. It's not just America that believes in keeping people armed in case it's time to pick them up and defend your borders or to deal with any type of major political crises that are going on. Look at Switzerland. There's a reason why all those people are able to own guns. And every male in there has to go into some military training, I think around 18 years old or so. You don't have to stay in the army, but you at least have to get the training so in case shit happens, you know what to do. And they all own weapons. They happen to have a little bit more of a mature attitude when it comes to guns, but again, that's a video for another time. This has nothing to do with overthrowing government. This has to do with making sure that you got the people needed in order shit happens. So, I mean, I hope that, just the historical context, the fact that you have the people who put this country together didn't really have a high opinion of the average individual in the first place. And you begin to understand why I said what I said. It is incredibly freaking naive to suggest that they put in that amendment to make it say you will have a leg up against government. That's ridiculously naive. They say nothing of, ignorant of the historical period of the time. Now, to go on my rage about the right wing using this as a rallying point, not only are these people misleading people with this, but the reason why they're using it isn't even in the spirit of what they're saying. I mean, if you're using that particular amendment in order to get the people to realize, look, you have power. You're not supposed to let these people walk all over it. Yeah, that's one thing. It'd still be misguided, but and wrong. But I could sort of respect that. But the only reason why they're using it is for intimidation. You don't do what we like. You don't pass the laws we like. We'll just shoot you. Fuck you. I mean, that's not exactly a noble idea. It's one thing to say the people will rise up if you try to go against us. That's one thing. It's another thing entirely to then use it as we're dangerous. You don't like you don't say what I like. Remember, we got the guns. Fuck you. That's just bullying now. There's nothing noble in that. Now it's just simply like, oh, we're not getting our way, so we're going to be belligerent. Like a freaking toddler. There's nothing noble about that. And yes, there is a difference. You have to understand that there is a difference between, look, you come after us, we will defend ourselves. You're not going to take away our beliefs, our way of defending ourselves. It's one thing to say that, and it's just simply another thing to like, man, one day we're just going to have to put bullets in their heads. And the other thing that kind of pisses me off about all this grandstanding is that it's just that, grandstanding. Even if you were saying that, yep, the people are going to rise up, you people aren't ready for armed insurrection, and you know it. All right? You can beat your chest and talk about how big your dick or balls is all you want. I live here. I know what Americans are like. You guys are nowhere near ready for any sort of armed rebellion against some type of tyrannical government because you don't want to do it. You don't want to rock the boat. You'll grandstand. You'll pound your chest and say all this big noise and walk around with a pistol on your hip and wave the flag all you want. But you aren't planning anything. None of you are getting together. And you aren't really, look at what's other countries that there's a whole lot of shit going on. There's a lot of political unrest. Those are people who are ready. They put their lives on the line. They're willing to go out there and get shot, just go out and do what it takes. I don't see any of that here for the people grandstanding about the Second Amendment. None of that. I am seeing a whole lot of nonviolent resistance from a whole bunch of other people who are willing to put their necks and lives on the line, and they get their asses kicked for it. But the people talking about the Second Amendment, I haven't seen you guys do shit to reflect your words. Because you're not, let's put it this way. The Tea Party got bought out by the Republicans, and willingly so. The Occupy movement got their asses kicked out of existence. Two different things. One group of people were willing to go out there and face the police squads. The other people were willing to get brought out. You're not ready for armed insurrection. Don't spare me the bullshit. This is one thing. I was trying to make this a not as an aggressive video, but this is one thing. As somebody who helped the stage protests, as somebody who's seen firsthand what governments will do to people, yeah, this is one thing that I'm not flinching on. This is one thing that, yeah, if you get offended by it, I don't give a fuck, because I've met people who are willing to put their lives on the line. People who are actually willing to do it non-violently, no less. Face major physical damage or psychological damage, getting locked up for what they're doing. You guys aren't going, many of you guys, most of you guys beating your chest about the Second Amendment are doing nothing like that, and you will never do anything like that. So shut the fuck up. Okay? Now, I know there's some people out there who I have talked to personally who talk about the Second Amendment. Oh yeah, they're willing to do it, but they give me the exact same complaint that I give. But nobody out there is willing. There's no organization. There's no real passion. There's no real spirit. People are just happy to continue going to the mall. I mean, for the God's sakes. Sorry, I shook the camera. They have been putting out report after report about what the NSA is doing to its own people, all the spying that's been going on. No outcry. Not one. We've seen reports about what the banks have been doing to fuck over our economy and to keep people poor. We know the schemes that they've done. And now, because of this recession, it was a depression. God damn it. I'm calling it what it was. Now all these, these rich motherfuckers in the banks or whatever are now all the stuff that all the people lost, they're just buying it back up for cheap. Just as they've done before. They did this during the Great Depression. They did this during the bank crash. Look at American history. Every time the common citizens try to find some way to get a leg up, they're just beginning to build up their own personal finances. They're beginning to live a comfortable life. They're beginning to wrest back things from the corrupt motherfucking powers that be that are trying to keep everything to themselves. Every time the middle class is just beginning to rise, just beginning to get something for themselves, something happens to take it all away, and you're back to square one. Don't think it's a coincidence. And it's happening right now again. All the homes people lost, all that money that they lost, their 401ks crashing, their finances going down the tubes. That money went somewhere. And it wasn't going in your pockets. They're taking, and they're still trying to find ways to take away your shit. Your benefits are being cut. Your wages continue. The fact that you have to fight these people just to get a decent wage should already let you know. I mean, that's more than enough to let you know what's stacked up against you. And you guys are doing shit about it. In other freaking countries, they were willing to throw their bankers in jail for what they did to their economy. And their economies are beginning to stabilize, if not already stabilized. There are protests going on where they see the type of shit that their governments are trying to shove down their throats. Here, you got people arguing for it. Many of you guys talking about the Second Amendment are some of the same people like, yeah, big businesses should be able to do what they're doing. Yeah, it's welfare, these corporate, we need to cut all this shit. You're shills. And you're going to be telling me about you ready for armed insurrection? Really? This is what I mean. This is what makes me disgusted about the people who are beating their chest about it. Because most of the people talking about that stuff have already sold out. And they are nowhere near ready to deal with what would happen if this country fell apart and it's time for you to grab your stuff. They got a Rambo image of that, but they don't really know what it means to put your life on the line for your country and your ideals. Like, if you're willing to go to make yourself look like a terrorist, because that's pretty much what's going to happen. If a bunch of you guys decide, you know what, we've had enough, and you band together, you actually do decide to go with your passions and collect guns and say that the government's corrupt and that's it, we're overthrowing them by force, you're going to be labeled as terrorists. So let's be real here. You're going to be labeled as terrorists. You're going to be public enemy number one. And because of the way propaganda works in this country, most people will not be on your side. Are you ready to deal with that? Are you ready to see your friends get shot down? vilified in the news all over and have no real friends, where you're going to have to constantly go underground to build up a real network and slowly but surely try to build your reputation up, hoping that you won't get completely crushed like so many other groups before you that were doing this non-violently? Are you willing to do that? You know the answer to that question. So don't come after me for actually pointing this out, okay? For bursting your bubbles, for showing you who you really are. No one in this country, most people in this country aren't even ready for unarmed resistance. And the few people that are fighting a lonely battle. They've been fighting that lonely battle for decades now. I know these people. I know what I'm talking about. That's why I can stare at you guys and say that, yeah, I can make that video that I made before, and I can make this one right now and say what I'm saying. All you guys grandstanding means not, I mean, I shouldn't say you guys, but because to be honest, most if not all the comments into that last video, I know where you guys are coming from. And even the ones that were disagreeing with me, I see the fire in your bellies, okay? I will admit that. But the people I'm talking about when I'm saying the crazy right-wing guys, those are the ones I don't respect because they not. Those are to me the cowards. Because those are the same people who, when I'm seeing other movements out there actually trying to tell you what the hell's going on in government, stuff that right now you're beginning to see, and it's people like me and those other people saying, we told you this shit 20 years ago. The same people beating their chest about the Second Amendment were the same people going, how dare you go up against our government, America? Now that the shit's coming against you, now you want to talk about the Second Amendment? About it's your rebellion button? Fuck you, please. We're not impressed. I'm not impressed. And that's why I made the video that I made. And I'm sticking by it, unless you guys can prove to me otherwise. But history is not on the side of that particular stance that the Second Amendment is your rebellion button. The historical context of how the Constitution was made and why that amendment was put in there doesn't support it. And even if it was put in there for that, which it wasn't, most people in this country aren't ready for that anyway. They have no plans, and they have no real motivation or ambition to do anything like that. So save the talk. In fact, you guys would be a lot more effective if you were trying to come up with non-violent means to do this. And the reason why I say that is because many of the more non-violent objectives tend to be a little bit more effective in getting the word out. And you would have less of a chance of having to worry about being labeled as public enemy number one. They may still come after you, and they'll come after you in different ways, but you'll have more of a chance of being able to get your message out there about things need to change around here. It's a long, painful struggle, I'll admit, but it's effective to a point. You need more people to be aware of what's going on for it to be fully effective. But now I'm rambling on something else. This video is actually longer than the last one I did, and I apologize for that. But I hope you guys see why. I'm hoping this clears up. I hope you guys can fully see my position here. I didn't say what I said in the last one because I agree with government. And I didn't say what I was saying last time simply out of anger at the right wing or just simply wanting to insult them. No. There's historical reasons for why I stated what I stated. There's context for why I said what I stated. And quite frankly, I know that many of the people beating their chests about it aren't even going to do what it takes to actually go. They won't even stand behind what they're saying. Which doesn't really mean anything to begin with because that's not what the Second Amendment was for. I hope that clears that up. This has gone way too long and I need to get started on the other video that I wanted to do on sword stuff. So, catch you guys later.